Any guess?
4,000.
2,300 degrees? Yeah? Any other guesses?
4,000.
Well, it's actually really close. It's about 150 degrees cooler than that, sitting at 2,150. So we keep this running 24/7. We use natural gas to go ahead and fuel all of our furnaces in here. So as you can imagine, Consumers Energy really loves what we do. We actually never turn this furnace off. We keep it running 24/7, and that's because if we ever wanted to cool it down, it would end up taking 2 to 3 weeks just to cool it down. Another 2 to 3 weeks to heat it back up. So we just keep it running and only ever shut it off at maybe every 7 years.
I'm gonna put this on
So our
YouTube.
next unit is the pipe warmer, which is this unit right here. Where you can see we have our irons and pipes sitting in some flame. So hot glass is kind of funny. It will not stick to something that's not also hot. So we have to heat our irons up to about 1,000 degrees before the hot glass will stick to it. Our final machine is this reheating unit that we're standing in front of kind of right here. We do have 3 of them in this hot shop, but we only really need the one on right now for this demonstration. We do have 3 for when we have classes here during the week. So the reheating unit, as the name kind of implies, is to reheat the glass. Glass cools down very quickly. We really only have 30 seconds to a minute to work with the glass before it's become too cool to manipulate. So you'll notice we're constantly getting back up and reheating the glass. So I want you guys to guess how hot this one is too. I'm kind, and I want you to guess if it's hotter or colder than the furnace. What do you guys think?
Hotter.
Hotter? Colder. So it's actually hotter. It is 150 degrees hotter, so it's actually the same number that you originally guessed, 2,300 degrees Fahrenheit. I just think it's cool. So we keep it that much hotter, just allows us to heat the glass up just a little bit quicker, so you don't stand in front of it quite as long.
I'm
So
gonna
as you
put
can
this on
imagine, when we're
YouTube.
standing in front of it, all of that heat is just coming at us. And we don't want to be there. We want to be there as little as possible. So Brent's gonna go ahead and get another gather from our furnace. We get multiple gathers really just to kind of layer up how much glass we have. This way we can make sure we have enough glass to actually make our piece. So have any of you guys ever seen a glass blowing demonstration before?
No.
A couple yeses. I know I've seen you guys around here before, so I know you guys have been here. A couple no's. That's all right. We're making some cool stuff. You can ask whatever questions you want, or no questions. I just really like when there are questions, so please ask them. So yeah, I'm just going to tell you about what's going on. We also have screens and cameras in case you can't really see something from where you're sitting. There isn't really ever a perfect spot to see everything in a glass blowing demonstration, so we try to kind of work our way around that issue. So what we're doing right now is using a wooden tool called a block, or that was a wooden tool called a block, just to kind of shape up the glass. And now we're going ahead and using this tool, which I think is kind of one of the neatest tools we have. I'll get back to it in a second. What's your question?
How hot is that glass?
How hot is that glass? That glass is sitting at about 2,000 degrees.
Oh my god.
Yeah, it's really hot. So we have to keep, for glass to be pretty mobile, it has to be between 1,600 and 2,100 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything below that, and it won't move, pretty much. So we gotta get it pretty hot.
No doubt.
So that tool that Brent was using just a moment ago, I think it's my favorite tool just because of how simple it is. So it looks like a soggy newspaper because it is a soggy newspaper. We take your daily news, fold it up a bunch, and soak it in some water, and then use that to shape the glass. So unlike a lot of our other tools, we aren't confined to certain shapes or angles and have the freedom to push the glass around with our hands. So I think that's kind of cool because it's literally the closest we'll ever come to moving the glass with our hands without burning ourselves. So you'll notice that we have to constantly be turning the blowpipe. That's because if we ever stop, all of that hot glass will slump towards the ground. We have to be really careful because when it ever slumps towards the ground, it becomes not in line with the rest of the blowpipe, which we call off-center, it pretty much becomes it affects how the piece will be shaped. If you guys can think of kind of a ceramicist analogy, you guys can think of like a potter's wheel where it goes around and around, you have clay in the middle and you're shaping it with your hands. So having a piece off-center is like taking that lump of clay and not putting it in the center, but instead putting it off to the side. So then you're going around and around trying to shape a piece. Your walls will end up wonky. So that'll kind of is what will end up here if you have a piece off-center and don't fix it. You end up with a wonky piece.
Is there an indefinite number of times that you can heat glass?
Can you just continuously heat the glass over and over? Yes and no. So the best heat you'll ever get is straight out of the furnace. So that's at the point where the glass is all one temperature. And as it gets cold, it all cools down at the same time. And as you heat it up, you heat it from the outside to the inside. So you'll always, after kind of that first gather and cool down, you'll never have the nicest heat you can ever have. And really kind of one of the things that glass workers really want to make sure they do is maintain the heat. Because if that core, the inside layers of glass ever get too cold, it is so difficult to get it back warm again to where it's nice and moving evenly. So if you notice, we never actually let it get to the point where it's super cold and clear. We are constantly getting back up and making sure we maintain that kind of like orangey color. Especially here during the beginning where it's super thick. But otherwise, yeah, you can just continuously heat it over and over. The only thing is you end up getting tired. Like, I've been with pieces that have taken like 4 to 5 hours to make, and you get exhausted.
Oh my god. Because the tools look heavy.
This is really cool.
It's actually not that heavy. This is about maybe 2-3 pounds. And yeah, so everything's pretty.
This is so cool.
Huh?
This is
it
really
so
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's great. It's really fun because you like start working with it and you're just like, okay, I have to figure out how I can keep doing this. This is amazing. It's awesome. I love it. So you'll notice we're working in teams of 2. That's a pretty common setup. A lot of glass blowers work in these teams of 2. Rarely ever do we work solo. I mean, it is possible, but it's 10 times more difficult to make a piece by yourself than it is to have at least one other person there helping. You'll notice as we go through, Ben will be inflating the piece while Brent is the one shaping it with tools. If you can think about it, if you're doing this yourself, you can choose one or the other. You can't really do both at the same time. So that can also kind of change how the piece is shaped.
How hard is it to blow?
How hard is it to blow the glass? That once again depends on how hot the glass is. The hotter it is, the easier it is to blow. But typically it just kind of feels like you're inflating a party balloon. It's pretty much the equivalent of doing that. But if it gets too cold, like a lot of beginners tend to have colder glass, you can end up feeling like you're about to pass out. So the hotter it is, the easier it is.
This is literally not my first time making a YouTube video, so I'm just like, I can do this.
Alright, so we're going to go ahead and start establishing the bottom of our piece, which arguably is the most important part. Because, I mean, who wants a piece of glass that's a Weeble Wobble toy? That just causes way too much anxiety if you have kids, or a pet, or live somewhere where there's, a draft. So yeah, no, it's funny. My parents got my uncle a glass gift, and he lives out in Seattle, and there's a lot, and like in California. I think this is when he was living in California. And so there was an earthquake, and literally he grabbed the dog, the glass, and stood in a door frame. And he messaged, or like called us when it was over, and he's like, "The glass is okay, guys." Because I use an example where I'm like, if you live somewhere where a lot of natural disasters happen. So I just thought of that. So I thought it was so funny to add.
YouTube.
Anyway, about the dog and the glass. Anyways, so here we are establishing the bottom using just a wooden paddle. There's nothing super special about it.
I can tell that's super burnt.
Maybe the type of wood. We tend to use hardwoods, so then there's no knots or really dense grain bits to burn out quicker or less quickly than the rest of the paddle. Well, that's about about it. Anyway, so now that we have the bottom established, that's a pretty good indication that we're going to go for our transfer process. So what we're going to do is take the iron that Ben has, get a little bit of glass, and attach that to the bottom of the piece. And then we're going to break it off of the blowpipe that it's currently on. So, I know it's a Saturday, nobody really wants to think about it, but can any of you think about why we would be doing that? So we've got the piece on our blowpipe right now, right? And the top is connected to the blowpipe. So if we wanted to shape the top half of our piece at all, we'd be messing with the only thing keeping it on the blowpipe and not crashing to the ground. So instead of taking a risk like that we might, do something weird or shape it differently or be restricted to how many tools we can use, we are going to flip it around pretty much so we can work on the top, pretty much 10% of the piece. So what Ben's got going on over here is our punty, or that little bit of glass shaped into like a slight taper. So the punty will act as a small dot of glue between the bottom of the piece and the iron in his hands. So we want this connection to be temporary, so temperature is key. If it's too hot, that piece will fuse to the iron, and then you have a base on the end of a 4-foot long stainless steel iron, which doesn't have that many uses that I can think of. I'm just saying, don't really know how you would apply that in everyday situations. If it's too cold, it might not stick at all, and when we go to break it off the blowpipe, the whole piece just falls to the ground and breaks into a million pieces, which we don't want, because we just spent 20 minutes making that piece. You just spent 20 minutes watching this be made, and I'd have to clean it up, so we want to avoid that at all costs. So going ahead and attaching that to the bottom of the piece. We can then go ahead and use some water to cause some slight surface fractures to appear on the surface of the glass. So when we tap it, it breaks off cleanly exactly where we want it to. So that's like one of the places where everything can go horribly wrong and there's nothing you can do about it. Because if you don't do that perfectly, you end up with either a piece falling on the ground or cracks running through the entirety of your piece. So we have a constriction point there to kind of guide where those cracks form. We use the water to cause thermal shock, which is when that glass goes through a quick change in temperature to create these surface fractures. So when we tap it, it's like having a perforated page that you're ripping out of a notebook. It breaks exactly where you want it to. Yes?